I think the Final Destination franchise is the only series of films where the entire point is to go in hoping for everyone in the cast to die. So how is Bloodlines, the sixth installment? Plagued by a recurring violent nightmare, a college student returns home to find the one person who can break the cycle and save her family from the horrific fate that inevitably awaits them. Just like with the other films, this opens with a banger of a destructive sequence, and as far as build-up goes, it's probably one of the strongest the films have delivered. The first Final Destination took a decent amount of time to introduce us to characters before unleashing the tragedies. Here, we get a protracted sequence that has all of the hallmark traits of a cutesy and emotional setup, drawing us in with a few charismatic characters until the fateful moment when everything just goes to hell. Then, this is where the film breaks from tradition. At least in a way. We flash forward something like 45-ish years to the present, and then are introduced to the leading character we're going to follow for as long as she's able to evade death. Caitlin Santawana plays Stephanie, this college kid who's becoming an insomniac thanks to these terribly realistic repeating nightmares. So she goes home to try and figure out what the heck is going on. Now, I don't know about you, but in the majority of these films, I'm not really invested in the characters. I mean, there are typically a few that I seriously want to die quickly because of just how creepy, skeezy, or maybe just awful the character is. But even with the main protagonists, it's rare that I'm really concerned for their well-being. I'm here for the convoluted and tricky death sequences. But in Bloodlines, just like with how the opening is different, so is the storyline. We get actual character development on several in the cast. And it's not like the story belabors any of the background or takes inordinate amounts of time to spend giving us just all the inane details of somebody's life in hopes that we'll slightly care about them. But through the course of the plot development, we learn enough about certain characters and then have the rest naturally addressed as the arcs progress. Now, this has the awesome effect of building some connection with the characters, meaning that the anticipation, even dread of what might happen to them, it's heightened, which then creates way more engagement and investment in the movie. And that's exactly what happens. While I didn't always like the character of Stephanie, I completely understood her worry and concern because it had backing that enhanced the character rather than just some meaningless fluff. There were also a couple of others within this that were built up so that I was uneasy about their potential fate. Now, Stephanie's brother was one, along with two of her cousins. Now, one of her other cousins was more like wallpaper and background compared to the others, so while there were moments that brought tension, I didn't care too much about her like I did the others. Now, the kills and the whole Rube Goldberg setup that Death concocts just in order to take those who cheated him, they are done well and drawn out so that almost all of them are just not immediate, but instead leave us guessing at where the final blow will come from and then how gruesome it's going to be. And a few somewhat abrupt, others have us watching setups that have us looking all over the screen at the potential hazards. And it's not like the camera doesn't give away where we're supposed to look. I mean, it points out all of the dangers and threats. But just like with any immersive death contraption setup, not all we're shown is relevant to the final execution. And I chose that word specifically. I love that. It just makes some of the deaths all the more satisfying. And I think this does point a bit to my own psyche, but at every single death in this film, I laughed out loud. Not because they were stupid or terribly done, but because the creativity, or maybe the pain, or simply just the suddenness, created a laugh. And it's not like I sat there with continual laughter. It was an outburst of audible amusement. And then I went back to being enthralled and stressed at when, where, and how the next death is going to occur. And if you're looking for gore, I mean, this doesn't skimp. We get a lot of brutal nastiness. And most of the time, it looks great. Now, obviously, through some of this, there is the use of CGI, but a lot of what happens looks to be accomplished through practical effects, making them more visceral and disgusting, but also awesome. Now, something that may be a big detractor for people, and it was to some degree for me, was the pacing. This was pretty uneven as the story went along. In just about all of the other Final Destination films, we get the setup, a lull, even briefly, and then the killings ramp up. Here, because we are getting so much more backstory and development, these delay the deaths and then space them out. There are some that would come in quick succession, but more often than not, that lull that would happen in the other movies feels more noticeable here because it happens several times, giving us multiple ups and downs within the storytelling speed. And this also makes the entire film feel longer than it is. It's an hour and 50 minutes, so it's not overly lengthy, but the filmmakers made a choice. They could either skimp on the character and story development and get us right into the kills, which would be exciting, but also unmemorable, Or they could sacrifice a bit of the momentum in order to create characters and sequences that draw us in and increase the overall dread because we actually care. Now, I prefer the added depth because it made the story more memorable, but I wasn't on the edge of my seat the entire time thanks to the dips and the unevenness of the pacing. One thing I think everybody's going to agree on, whether you had fun with this movie or not, is that we get the return of Tony Todd. And I appreciate how the story honors his involvement in the franchise, bringing him more character depth that is included naturally, but also meaningfully. So overall, this is certainly one of the best entries in the Final Destination franchise. Thanks to patient character building and believable plot development, the storytelling is engaging and effective in providing harrowing thrills. The creativity of Death's designs is complex enough to avoid obviousness while still delivering the jaw-dropping, expletive-inducing responses to the unexpected torture. The pacing suffers due to added character background, but the result is a thrilling death ride full of gruesome and bloody violence that will make you wince and yell and clamor for more. There's no sex or nudity, a ton of profanity, and of course, a massive amount of gnarly violence. I mean, that's why we watch these, right? I give Final Destination Bloodlines 4 out of 5 couches. All right, do you have a favorite in the series, or maybe just a favorite death sequence? For me, in number 5, the gymnast scene, that is probably the one that gets me the most, but we got some contenders in Bloodlines. I would love to hear your favorites in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.